hope the senator will be mindful of the other senator's time when he uses his own.
Well, I am mindful of the other senator's time. I'm also mindful that this committee spends a ton of time on things like amnesty and not time on doing our jobs. So this committee doesn't have time to look into allegations. Ask unanimous consent that both of these articles be entered into the record.
Without objection, thank you very much, Senator, for your comments. Are on favorably reporting the nomination.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not completed.
I'm sorry. How much more time do you need?
5 to 10 minutes. As I said, I wanted to talk about Myrna Perez.
She has the nomination before the committee.
Yes, that's what I'm prepared to talk about right now.
I hope the senator will be mindful of the other senator's time when he uses his own.
Well, I am mindful of the other senator's time. I'm also mindful that this committee spends a ton of time on things like amnesty and not time on doing our jobs. So this committee doesn't have time to look into allegations of racism, doesn't have time to look into allegations of participating in Chinese communist propaganda, doesn't have time to look into the Biden administration releasing thousands of illegal aliens with COVID, but we have time to move political activists forward to satisfy the partisan interest of Democrats in the Senate. Let's talk about this judicial nominee.
The moment began with a simple procedural exchange. Senator Ted Cruz asking for unanimous consent to enter articles into the record. Routine by the book. But as Chairman Dick Durbin responded, what followed was anything but ordinary. A short pause, a phrase uttered with restraint but edged with tension. I hope the senator will be mindful of the other senator's time. That was the spark. And in that instant, the air in the hearing room shifted. Senator Cruz leaned forward, his tone rising with that familiar defiance, the kind that has marked his career in every hearing, every clash, every headline. I am mindful, he shot back, but I'm also mindful that this committee spends a ton of time on things like amnesty, and not time on doing our jobs. It wasn't just about the clock anymore. It was about control, about who sets the agenda, and whose priorities define what justice means in the halls of American power. What played out in those few tense minutes between Durbin and Cruz was more than a personal disagreement. It was the collision of two political philosophies, two worldviews forged in decades of partisan battle. Durbin, the institutionalist, guarding the committee's decorum, its tempo, its rules. Cruz, the insurgent, challenging the premise of the rules themselves. To Durbin, mindful meant order, fairness, and the discipline of governance. To Cruz, it meant censorship, a gate closing on outrage, on the chance to name what he saw as the failures of the system. This is how democracy sounds when it strains under its own weight. The calm of procedure interrupted by the tremor of conviction. Cruz's rebuttal wasn't about time, it was about accusation. He fired off charges like artillery in the chamber's stillness, that the Judiciary Committee doesn't have time to look into racism, into alleged ties to Chinese propaganda, into the release of illegal aliens with COVID, but somehow, he said, has time to confirm political activists as judges. His words cut across the marble room like steel. They weren't questions, they were statements of grievance. Grievances meant not just for the committee, but for the cameras, for the voters, for history. Durbin, sitting in the chairman's seat, represented the stillness of authority. A man accustomed to managing storms of rhetoric, letting the tempest burn itself out before restoring the rhythm of procedure. But even he could feel the undercurrent, that what was being debated was no longer Mayor Perez's nomination. It was the legitimacy of government itself. The camera pans from Cruz's glare to Durbin's steady posture. One speaking from the edge of anger, the other from the weight of responsibility. Both men know the power of the stage they share, and neither is truly speaking to the other. They are performing for a larger jury, the American people. In that exchange, the subtext becomes unmistakable. The Senate, the so-called world's greatest deliberative body, has become a battlefield of narratives. One side demands order, the other demands revolution within that order. And as each word echoes through the chamber, the distance between them grows wider, a reflection of a country divided not just by party, but by perception. To Cruz's supporters, this moment is proof that he speaks truth to power, that he refuses to let procedural politeness drown out moral urgency. To Durbin's defenders, it's proof of a different kind, that civility and focus are all that stand between governance and chaos, and somewhere between them lies the truth, that democracy, in its purest form, requires both confrontation and restraint. As the hearing moves on, the rhythm of government resumes, but the exchange lingers because it reveals the deeper illness in the American system. It's not just about judicial nominees or floor time. It's about whether we still believe that truth can emerge through debate, or whether debate itself has become a substitute for truth. In the soft hum of microphones and shuffling papers, one can almost feel the ghost of the old Senate, the one that prided itself on deliberation, persuasion, and respect. That Senate feels distant now. In its place stands a stage of performative politics, where every word is a headline, every glance a viral clip. The arguments have grown louder, but the listening has grown silent. When Dick Durbin says, "Be mindful," he's invoking the forgotten virtue of public life: humility, the willingness to yield the floor, to let others speak, to trust the process. When Ted Cruz pushes back, he's invoking the opposite virtue: dissent, the moral defiance that refuses to stay quiet in the face of what he calls hypocrisy. Both virtues are necessary, but in our era, each is wielded as a weapon against the other. The moral of this clash is not who won the argument, but what the argument revealed. It showed a Congress at war not over facts, but over meaning, where mindfulness can be seen as either courtesy or control, and where truth itself seems negotiable depending on who holds the gavel. And so the hearing drifts back into formality. The nomination moves forward. The senators' voices fade into procedural calm. But outside that chamber, the country listens, weary, divided, waiting for something that feels like leadership again. Because in the end, the American people don't need more bickering about who gets 5 more minutes to speak. They need 5 honest minutes of truth, spoken without agenda, without calculation, without fear. Until that happens, these moments, sharp, viral, theatrical, will keep replaying like echoes in an empty room. This was more than a tense moment between two senators. It was a snapshot of the nation itself, one half demanding order, the other demanding outrage, both believing they are saving the republic. But the republic is not saved by winning the argument. It's saved by remembering why we argue. This is Congress' signal. Stay vigilant, stay informed, subscribe, and keep watching. The truth still speaks, if we're mindful enough to hear it.